Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have this opportunity to interview Emily Graham, who will be speaking to us from from Orlando, Florida. Right, Emily?
Yeah.
Emily is a wife and mother to 3 children, her 2 daughters on this side and her son who is on the other side. She is a career strategist, a resume writer, and an interview coach who is also an author, a speaker, and a grief coach who works with bereaved parents to help them rebuild their lives after the loss of their child. Emily's writing has been featured on Huffington Post, Still Standing Magazine, Her View from Home, Compassionate Friends, Build a Life After Loss, Making Lemonade with Wit and Kells, and Living Full Out radio show. Her beautifully written, 5-star rated book titled Confessions of Child Loss takes her readers with her as she claws her way back to life after the sudden loss of her precious 7-year-old son, Cameron, and shares the answers to her heart-wrenching questions such as, why? Where did my child go? Who am I now? How do I even do this? Then her readers also get to witness a new relationship unfold, and they rejoice with Emily as she realizes her son isn't gone. He still exists, just in a different way. I'm looking forward to talking with Emily about how to normalize the messy parts of loss so that people feel less alone, how thinking differently about healing can provide a way forward after child loss, ongoing spiritual connections with deceased children, the path to healing and shifting into living, and so much more for an interview with the refreshingly authentic Emily that will surely inspire us, enlighten us, and touch our hearts. Hi, Emily. A warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you, Irene. I am honored to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
I know we're going to help a lot of people and really bring insights to people. It's going to be fabulous. So let's introduce everybody to your family and to Cameron, because to tell us about Cameron, his relationship with you, his dad and his sisters, and the heart-wrenching way you suddenly lost him, which when I read it in your book, I was like, oh my goodness. And on a special day in the world's
Yes. So Cameron was our oldest of 3, my only boy. And he was the type, he was a mama's boy. He was the rule follower. He was the super sweet kid that would literally go out and find the underdog and make friends with them. You know, when it came to his sisters, he at one point used to call my older daughter our little daughter. So it was like he took on, like this almost parental safety key, he just sort of totally took care of her. And I think that he was just the sweetest ever. And we ended up, when I tell our story, I always say he went from being sort of a normal, happy, healthy boy to complete opposite in a matter of 12 hours. So it was Christmas 2015. We were doing all of our traditions, getting ready for the holiday. He had been a little bit sick, but nothing that was out of the ordinary. We had taken him to an urgent care because it was one of those, we need to get some meds before we go into the holiday. And so we did all of that. We got home. that night, he put himself to bed because he's so excited for Santa to come in the morning, right? So he put himself to bed, and within a couple of hours, just as my husband and I were kind of done with all of our prep stuff, I hear him get up and I hear him in the bathroom. And I, of course, went quickly to sort of see what was going on. And he was just very, very sick. And it escalated quickly. It was, again, not anything that would have been super alarming, but then things got weird and he started sort of slurring his speech. And I think he was maybe hallucinating a little bit. Like there was some weird things. And when his fever spiked, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, Christmas morning now. And we're like, put him in the car, let's get him to the hospital. And just very rapidly, it became a medical mystery. He continued to decline. By probably 5, 6 in the morning. He was going into a coma. We were being transferred to Children's Hospital. And when we got there, that was when they said, there's nothing more that we can do. His organs were starting to shut down. His brain was starting to hemorrhage. Just crazy.
Horrible.
Everything that could go wrong was. And so at that point, it was probably 10 in the morning, Christmas morning, right? My girls we should all be at home opening gifts, doing our Christmas thing. But instead, we were sort of preparing for the removal of life support. And so we had kind of that next 12 hours where we knew that that was the outcome, but they make you wait for a period of time to test brain activity. And so just after midnight on Christmas Day, which is also my birthday, we were withdrawing life support. And so it changed everything. And so that was sort of the start. And I always say we had time to think about it. Those 12 hours, I was trying hard to imagine what my life was going to look like that next day. And it was nothing like what it felt. And so, as you know, experiencing sort of a profound loss, it's so life-changing that you sort of fall into this dark hole of grief.
No, it's horrible. I mean, and I can so relate to everything you're saying, because in my situation, when my husband passed, he was buried on my son's 21st birthday. And my son was also born the day after Christmas and all of that. It's like it's a holy moly.
Yes.
It's a wow. So, but you also received prescient messages that foretold you not only who you'd marry, but that Karen's life on this side would not be long. Can you? So
yes.
It's interesting. Your story's so interesting to me because I got a heads up that Saul was going to go also. So I'm very interested in what was that like for you?
So I was, so for me, it was a voice in my head, and it was literally, so the first time I heard it, was of the voice saying, this is the person you're going to marry. And it was the first time somebody had said my husband's name to me. And it was like
literally a voice saying,
yes, it was like a voice. It sounded like my own voice, but it was this weird, surreal thing. Cause I'm like, I know that's not originating from me. That's not my thought. That's just the way I sound when I talk to myself in my head. And so somebody had said, oh, have you met David yet? And this voice came in, and I remember I was standing in front of a mirror and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, what was that? Because I was like, I have not even laid eyes on this person and you're telling me this is the person I'm going to marry. And so when it happened again later, so obviously we got married, and several years later, Cameron would have been my only child at the time. He was probably 2. He's playing in the room in front of me, and I heard a voice, exact same voice, say to me, you're going to lose a child. And I remember going, like, I recognize this, but why? Like, why would I have such a dark thought? And I would always sort of write it off as like, it's just a mom who imagines the worst, right? Like our worst nightmare would be the loss of a child. So maybe it's just me doing this weird thing. So I always tried to just sort of shove it off. But throughout his life, I became very intentional in our relationship. I was always focused on the memories, right? What are we doing? What does that relationship look like? Take photos, take videos. Very different than maybe what I did with my girls. And I always felt like that sounded bad, but for whatever reason, I felt like this was different. I had to do this. I was going to need this stuff.
You had gotten the message. And even
Yes.
though you're a little, what
Even
is
though I
that?
can write it off, yeah, I don't want to believe it. There's still something back there that's like, I don't know.
Right. I mean, I can relate also because when I got the message, the first message I got 2 months before the accident was Saul has to go. Many lessons will be learned from his death. And the weekend that we were driving to the country, I didn't know that that was the weekend. But I thought to myself, I will do anything he wants this weekend. I'm going to make this a great, I just had a feeling
Yes.
wherever he wants to go, whoever he wants to see, whatever. And the night before the accident, he said to me, I'm so lucky and thankful to have you in my life. And wasn't this the greatest weekend and blah, blah, blah. So,
Yes.
we have, as I was preparing for your interview, I thought, my goodness,
There are
there's so many
so
similarities in our stories.
Yes. Yes. Because it was the same. So when Cameron, before he went into a coma, our last words to each other were, I love you. And it was like, how perfectly timed was all of this stuff. And so I heard that voice several other times, once maybe in a couple months before he died. And the voice said to me, it's almost like time's almost up, like it's
Wow.
almost time. And I just remember just being so shocked every time this would come in. But it did make me, again, be very intentional in that moment and for the time that we had. And then the last time I heard it, I was standing at the end of his hospital bed. So we had just gotten him to the hospital. And I had this feeling of like, okay, we're at the hospital. We're going to be good now. Everything's okay. And as I stood there looking at him in the bed, I heard it say, this is it. It's sort of like, right. And it was sort of this feeling of, it's about to happen. Like we always think that it's going to be okay, but it's about to happen. And I was like angry. Like I was really angry because I was like, I don't want these thoughts. Like this needs to go away, especially right now. And then when it all played out, I think it ultimately helped me because down the road, I was able to look back at those things and align myself with the idea that, okay, there's a plan in some way, right? That this was meant to happen. I think it helped me make that leap a little bit faster and sort of, I don't know, that there's some sort of stress. I don't know what it is, but there's something here.
Before you know, it gives you the sense that there's more. That's how it was for me. Before I believed or knew,
yes.
But it was preparing me to give me a sense of coming contractions, and it was like kind of planted the seeds.
100%, yes. Because if I had never heard that voice, I probably would not have been as intentional in that relationship. And so I think that I had to be that. That was the sort of helping me to prepare in some weird way, even though we can't prepare for this.
Right. But in some weird way, by being intentional, and that happened to me too with Saul, you didn't have any woulda, coulda, shouldas with him.
Yeah.
You were so sad to lose him, but there was no stone unturned, nothing that needed to be said wasn't said, no regrets of I should have caught that moment or whatever. So in a way, you were being prepared. I mean, it's amazing. And then I know it took you 7 months to receive Cameron's autopsy results.
It did.
So what was that diagnosis and how did that impact your family?
Yeah, so it was all a medical mystery. Nobody could figure out what was going on that night. And so we asked for the autopsy, and it did take a long time to get the results back. And it was a fluke thing that they found, but something came back and they were able to rule out. It was like one of two things, and they ruled that out because of testing he had that night. And so they said, we think maybe he had a rare blood disorder called porphyria, and it would have been a medication. So I gave him a medication. He was sick. I bought an over-the-counter nasal spray that the doctor said he's good with this now that he's 7. I had this weird physical reaction of like, don't give it to him. I don't feel like he should have this, but I talked myself out of it and I administered it. And that's what we point to as being something in that medication doesn't work with this blood disorder. And so we all had genetic testing. My husband has it. Both of my daughters have it.
Wow.
And so there was just sort of a feeling too at some point where it was like he really sort of saved everybody else, because now we know this exists. We know what to do. We know how to, manage it a little bit better.
And out of loving yourself, you've forgiven yourself. I would expect.
Yes, it took me a long time. Yes, it took me a long time, because I really feel like those feelings that I had was like, this is it. But I really think that it would have happened another way, as crazy as that sounds, if it hadn't have been this.
Saul had 2 accidents before the accident that took him out.
Really?
So it was his exit point.
Yes.
Same thing with Cameron.
Yes.
And you also talk about in your book the significance of a number 12, that it was Cameron's sign for you. So what started happening? And then there was also a thing about shadows that started appearing after he transitioned. So tell us how he was acting in spirit to like, Mom, I'm here.
He 100% did. And it took me a while because I was able to go back and find out. I think that first morning he showed up. He used to come to my bedside at 6:30 in the morning, and he would quietly sneak in my room, and he would step up to the side of my bed and lean against it just slightly, enough that like I would feel the bed kind of shake a little bit, and I would wake up and look over. And that happened to me that morning. And I woke up like expecting to see him standing there, and he was not. So I think that was sort of his first time of showing up. A couple weeks in, I started seeing shadows running through our house. And I would tell you it was the same size as him. And I was like, I've got to be crazy that I'm even thinking this, that I'm even seeing this. Like, if I speak these words out loud, somebody is going to have me committed, because this is insane. And so I would literally see it through certain parts of my house. And that happened for a while. Wow. And then the number 12 came up. So I would start seeing 12.
Well,
and
what
it started
is the significance of the number 12, by the way? Is it
I don't know.
Number?
So I would tell you now, looking back, I can see all kinds of 12s throughout our life. So I would tell you that there's some sort of significance there. Even going back to like, how we have a due date when a baby is supposed to be born. His due date was October 12th.
Wow.
And so it was like, there's so many 12s throughout our life that were significant. And so it started with just seeing it on the clock. And then I would be like, every time I look, I'm seeing a 12. And then it would show up in other weird ways. When we would go out and do something fun, there would be a 12. We went to lunch one day and we sat down at the table, and they sat us at table 12. And there was a little placard there with the 12 on it that literally fell out of the holder onto the table. And I just kept going, there's something with these 12s. And then in my mind, I was like, well, maybe he's going to use this to communicate. And I feel like that was all he needed to sort of say, she sees this, let's run with it, and we go. And so again, one of those things that I think was weaved into our life. So I would see it, connect those dots, and then make the leap to where is he now, right? He still exists.
And then you started seeing mediums. So talk about finding out, where is he now? What was, tell us about that.
Yes. So for me, my number one thing was, he can't possibly be gone. And it sort of shatters every belief you've ever had about, is there an afterlife? Is there, like, what is beyond this? And so we went to a medium, and I had always believed in mediums, but I was just sort of like, I didn't know to what degree it was really, he was going to come through.
Medium, or you just kind of opened a phone
book? My husband found her, and he did his due diligence. He was looking to be like, how do I find somebody who's really well rated, lots of good reviews, and how do I book an appointment so that there's absolutely no way she knows who we are or can Google our story or anything at all. So he jumped through a lot of hoops to make that happen. And when Cameron came through in the reading, she looked at me and she said, you're seeing shadows. So you've seen him, and you're seeing a number over and over and over again. And I hadn't even told my husband. And so my husband's sitting there going, nope. And my eyes are like huge, because I'm like, yes. And he looked at me kind of surprised, and I was like, I have not spoken those words to anybody, but here you are telling me this. And so he's here. Like, there is something to this. And having enough of those experiences right? Matching what I was experiencing with him really pushed me forward to this whole idea
It's so comforting. Wow.
he's still here, right? There is still an ongoing relationship. We can communicate. He knows everything that's going on.
And also, did she tell you something about his death being part of a divine plan? That
Yes,
his
we
soul
did.
contract was up. Is
We
that how she
did.
helped you that way
So,
too?
so we had, that was actually a second medium reading that we did. And she goes, I don't usually go down this path, but he's pushing me to do this. And she's like, he wants you to know that this was part of a plan, that the two of you have done this life so many times before. And this time you were like, we're going big, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff. And if it hadn't have happened that night in that way, it would have been soon because his contract was up. And she goes, I don't like to use those words with people because you never really know how people are going to take it. But at the time, I was reading books about that stuff. And in my head, I was saying to him, is this real? Is this the stuff that I should be focusing on? And so for her to go there was my validation that like I'm on the right path.
Right. So now Cameron has sparked a spiritual awakening in you.
Yes.
And you're starting to go and you're trying to uh, work on your own post-traumatic growth
Yes.
because you're becoming aware, which is why all of this, I mean, you're using these healing modalities, right? And so now you become inspired to write your book, Confessions of Child Loss.
Right.
And so tell me what that meant, what inspired you, what it meant for your healing, and how does sharing your story and your grief help others who are also grieving? And anything else you'd like? I want everyone to know I read the book and it's wonderful. And would you,
Thank you.
what would you like to tell everyone about your book?
Yeah, so I started writing right out of the gate. I wrote that night that he died within the first few days, mostly because I had to get it out of my head and put it down on paper. And I shared it, and it really resonated with a lot of people. And I had sort of, I believe that Cameron sort of guided me in this direction because I started writing before he died. I started like a little mom blog kind of thing, and he was a part of that. And then when he died, I was like, I feel like I need to share this story. And that was sort of the direction then that I started writing. And so I was writing my own grief. I had probably 3/4 of the book written, and it sat on my computer for a couple years because I'm like, I don't know how this ends. I'm like, I'm so deep in my own grief. I've written the grief part of it. I've told all of these confessions, which are just sort of everything that I felt like if I said it out loud, people were going to be like, there's something wrong with her. But I know that in grief, these are normal things. And so it was sort of that way of putting the stuff out there in a way that felt like confessions, but people are going to resonate with this stuff because it's really how we're all feeling. We're just not talking about it. And it took, like I said, several years for me to figure out the ending. And it sort of felt like almost like a download at a certain point where it was like, this is the end right here. This is what you need to write. And it's really just about, there's not a fix for this. We don't like suddenly put the grief on a shelf and we're done with it. It's like we have to learn to live alongside of this.
Right.
And it's a path of healing that allows us to come back into life in a new way, connect with things in a different way than maybe we did before, and figure out who we are now. And so that was sort of coming full circle, but it's really like, let's go into the dark and messy parts of grief and let's put it all out there so we normalize it for people. And then along the way, share some things that may help people if they're in that place to feel like there's hope, there's a path forward.
Right. So now that you're talking about the messy parts of grief, and I can really relate to this.
Yeah.
How does loss like this change your relationship with others?
Entirely changes everything. I remember when I was trying to imagine what this was like, I thought, oh, it's just about him not being here, missing him, maybe our daily life being interrupted, but I didn't expect it to bleed into every relationship in my life. And I feel like for me, a lot of it was, I think when we're in deep grief, we have a hard time being with people who are still living life the way that we used to. I didn't feel like I fit into that anymore. I felt like I had these new priorities, or my priorities were together in a way that I was like, everything is the small stuff. I'm not even looking at the small stuff anymore.
But
And you guys,
that's changed you. Wow, yes,
yes.
it does.
And you guys out there, you're all focused on these little tiny, like I can't do that level of stuff anymore.
Right.
And so there's that piece that feels weird. There's also the piece of grief is just, especially child loss, like nobody wants to go there. And so people are
They don't
so
know how to talk to
uncomfortable.
you. They don't know what to say to you. They
Yes.
don't know how to relate to you.
And so we take a big step back and we're like, yep, we're just not going to go there. And I have a really hard time being around people who aren't willing to hear Cameron's name, to acknowledge the fact that, right, you might miss him, something might be happening, right? Or even just to talk about the fact that you still are grieving even years later. And so I think for a lot of people, that's so uncomfortable that they do sort of disappear from your life. And so you find yourself kind of alone for a while, and you figure out who your safe people are. So you start rebuilding this group of people around you. And then you have, right, this new way of being with people. And it's like, I can go back into those relationships now and do some of that small talk, but it's really not where I want to spend my time. Yeah, it's not meaningful to me. So I don't want to spend my time there. I would rather sit down and have these types of conversations.
Exactly. Well, because you've been through something so deep and traumatic.
Right.
It really gives you a large overview. A lot of people, I mean, bless them that they don't have to face this stuff, but they're looking at things that are minutia that are so important. And you just had the literal rug pulled out from under you your whole life, right?
Yes.
It changes your perspective. So I want to know also how thinking differently about healing provided a way forward for you after Cameron transitioned. And the big thing is, how did this loss, which was so devastating, it led you to discover yourself?
Yes. I, for a very long time, hated the word healing. So people would say, you need to find healing, or, right, you're going to heal, whatever, however they would use it. I was like, nope, not doing that. That's not going to happen, right? This is ridiculous. And what I realized as time went on, my healing sort of snuck up on me, where I would notice and I would be like, well, that's weird. I can do that now, but I couldn't before. Or, right, I would start doing certain things that helped me show up in the world. And I was like, okay, so maybe there is some healing, but maybe it's different than what I thought it was. And so I found I had to redefine entirely what healing was. And I think for so many of us, we're conditioned to think of healing as that destination, right? Where it's like you put a Band-Aid on it, and in a few days that cut goes away. You never think about it again. And that's how I thought healing was, that I had to forget, that I had to put this in the past, that I had to sort of be who I was before. And I didn't want to go back and be that, because I didn't think that was possible for me. And so I had to sort of reshape what that looked like. And for me, healing sort of became finding the things that helped me. And I learned that there were a lot of things inside of me that could be healed. So it wasn't that I was healing the grief necessarily, but I was healing the trauma, right? And I feel like grief and trauma, they're like so intertwined. And when I started to heal the trauma piece of it, grief changed. It became something that I could live alongside. And then it became about, how am I living my life? What am I doing? What do I need to change or work on or do to help me go back into these relationships in my life, or be more functional, or show up in the world in more authentic ways? And for me, that became the journey. So there is a point where it was all about my grief journey. It was all about the fact that Cameron had died. And then there was this shift where it was like, I'm focusing on his life now, the fact that he lived, and I have to focus on, how am I going to live after this? Because I really believe that is what we are supposed to do, is we have to figure out how to keep living. And my healing, the things that I was doing to help myself heal, helped me to do that. And sort of,
what kinds of things were you doing? What kinds of things were you doing, Emily?
So
To
I
help
did
you
a
heal?
lot. Yeah, so I did a lot of writing, a lot of journaling, because I think it's important to learn to put words to what you're feeling. I had to spend a lot of time going into my emotions. I was very uncomfortable with anything emotional. And so learning how to name what I was feeling, what was it like in my body? What do I do when I'm feeling that stuff? I had to work through, I used to have panic attacks in the kitchen every night. And I know that it all stemmed from just the bringing up all the stuff that happened that night. So I had to go through some of that sort of stuff and
And you were able to do this
get
basically
rid of
inside of yourself, which is
those triggers. I
most people,
did.
I mean, now you're a grief coach helping people to do this, but you were able to generate this for yourself?
I tell people all the time, I did not do it the right way. And when I say that is, I was sort of like, I can't go do traditional therapy because I really thought my thoughts were so dark that people were going to be like, oh, she's not fit to raise her daughters. Like we have to.
Oh, you're afraid.
So I had
Oh,
so I had all these fears that were sort of coming in this. And I spent a lot of time almost like putting myself into those situations to stir up the trauma because I felt like that's what I deserved for a long time.
oh,
Where it
wow.
was like,
Talk about a lack
right,
of self-love. Wow.
yes. And so I sort of tell people that there was almost this torture that I would do to myself of like, right, you just have to go do these things, even if you're not ready for them, even if you don't have the tools to do them well, because it's okay that you're messed up on the inside, because that's how it is when your kid dies, right? So I had all these really bad narratives. So there was a lot of reconditioning that I did. And I will tell you, it was all like it was all divine in some way, inspiration of putting people in my path, putting things in my path that helped me to see that maybe some of these things that I did the wrong way somehow helped me start to get to that healing level. And then I dove into the right things, right? Where I was looking at what are the tools, what are the things, what are the, trainings. And through that, I was healing myself first. And all the stuff that I was doing, I was healing myself. And then I was like, I have to figure out how to get this to people because it took me so long to find those things and to feel like this was possible and to have hope. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to help people.
You're providing them comfort and guidance from your own experiences.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's really an internal knowing plus adding to whatever you studied, right? So you were taking care of yourself, starting to take care of yourself, which I
Finally,
just love because
yes.
my thing is about be loving and kind to everyone, also includes
Yes.
us. And so what did self-care look like for you while you were grieving? Was it a massage?
Yeah.
Was it a facial? Was it a walk in the park? What were you trying to do to consciously love Emily?
Yes. And I love that message because when I look back, and even like we just said, through my early grief, I was not taking care of myself. I did not love myself. And I think even before, I didn't have a true concept of what self-care or self-love meant. And so what I found on my own journey was it's so much bigger, even than just the things that you mentioned. For me, it became about judgment, right? I had to stop judging myself. Things just were like, it just is. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking, it just is. We're not going to judge it. I had to learn how to be really be really compassionate with myself. So everything that happened, give myself a ton of grace, right? Just totally rewire the way that my brain operated because I had that self-talk in there that was like, you deserve this, right? You, whatever. I had to rewire a lot of that. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And then for me, it really has sort of been, how do I take care of me? What do I need? Figuring out what I need in any moment. I call myself a recovering people pleaser. I used to live my life for everybody else. And so for me, a lot of my healing has come from recognizing those things, unlearning. I think so much of this healing is unlearning the things that have been conditioned into us and learning sort of a new way. And it lets me
courage because you have to say no to people, Emily.
Yes.
And you've been,
it's so
I experienced this. I've been as a former people pleaser also.
Yeah.
They get mad at you when you
right?
When you change your pattern. They don't want that. It's
right.
just fine for them.
Yes. And that's another reason. And maybe it's like when it happened in this grief, so many people have left anyways. And it's like now that I've changed, other people are either going to leave or I'm okay at that point with whoever's leaving, go ahead and go. Like I'm just going to do this myself. And
Right. So
yeah,
this brings me to, you're a grief coach now,
yes,
and you've got a program called Living with Grief,
yes.
and you help others rebuild their lives. So tell everybody what that looks like. And hopefully no one ever needs it, but if someone needs
Yes.
you, why they can reach out to you and how you help them.
Yeah, so everything that I do is child loss related. And I really sort of felt like it was hard for me to find the things that helped. And everything out there is very general grief. I also went in and to all the self-help stuff, and I was like, if this helps me, I'm going to spin it so that it's people can see how this helps in child loss. So my program, Living with Grief, it's really designed to normalize this experience for people. I find that for so many, you don't have people in your life who I'm going to say speak grief. And so they don't understand maybe what you're thinking, what you're feeling. You sort of feel distant, you feel alone. And so this offers you that safe place where you can come and everybody speaks the same language. And when you come in, so we
So
do
it's a group
weekly.
experience.
It is a group experience. So I have a couple levels to the program. So some people come in on their own, and I host weekly live events on Facebook in a group. There's lots of videos. I have a growing video platform where I will put things out there for them. And then I have people who want to do weekly small groups. And so we will meet once a week for an hour as a group. It's the same people every week. So you build relationships.
You kind
You
of get a
really,
team going, right?
yes,
You kind of
it's
have
your
your own
support
tribe.
system.
It's your tribe.
It is. And we're sharing life with each other. And so when you're going through milestones, or even when you're going through the day to day and you're having a hard week, the people in your life might not really get it. But you come in here and you're like, this happened, and everybody understands all the layers that come with that. Or you come in and we actually laugh and we smile, right? And everybody knows that doesn't mean that you're okay now and that your grief is gone and that you're not also still sad. So it's just sort of an easy place to be. And I think for a lot of people, they find the discussions we have every week help them work through some of their stuff and create some of their own transformation.
That's wonderful. Absolutely
Yeah.
wonderful. And tell me, in your opinion, why should a person, with whatever they go through in life, why, and you didn't originally believe in this, why is it important for people to heal their stuff? And
Yeah.
because it's painful, you need a lot of courage. You're
Yes.
facing down your stuff. You can't hide from it if you're going to
Right.
be. Why is
And
it important for people to take that?
It's like that's what we want to do as humans. So personally, for me, it became kind of a spiritual thing. And when I launched on that spiritual journey, I started looking at, Cameron's talking about soul contracts and why do we come here? Why am I here? Why am I still here? And in my mind, one thing sort of became a joke to me. I was like, if I have to learn lessons and this happened for me to learn a lesson, well, I'm going to learn every single thing I can from this because I don't want to come back and do this again.
Bravo.
But then it also became like, right, like I still have time left here. And when I join him, I don't want to look back on this time and feel regret, like that I just laid down and died with him, essentially. Like there's still time left. And I'm like, I have to figure out how to make the most of that time and how to stay on my path. Like this is all, I think, part of my path. And I need to accept that. And I need to sort of keep putting one foot in front of the other and do what I came here to do, even if it's hard, even if it sucks. Like you figure out how to do it. And you really do. Like I promise you, when you find the things that help you and you start to have some sort of healing happen, it changes. Like grief changes for you and it becomes easier to be back in life, and you can get to a place where both of these things can come together in a way that I think is beautiful.
So you're saying that you can experience grief and joy at the same time.
Yes.
One is not exclusive of the other.
No. And that was a huge, huge, huge learning for me in this, was the whole holding space for two very competing things at the same time. And it's possible, but it takes a lot of practice. You really have to be willing, like you said, to be brave and to have that courage to sort of go into the things that we initially want to step back from and just keep trying it. And you will learn that, yes, we can experience joy again, or happiness, or enjoyment, whatever word they like. Yes, it's going to have some sadness undertones, but it's there, right? And you can have that. And it's really about cultivating that.
I would think that working with you would be wonderful because you'd be such a great role model for people, having come through it yourself and having the compassion to understand what they're experiencing with no judgment.
Yeah.
And being a role model, this is where I came to. You can get here too.
Yes.
And I know all your feelings. I know all that,
right.
you're going through. I understand. I think that would be tremendous for people. And Emily, I want to share this special quote from your wise and insightful book, Confessions of Child Loss. Somewhere along the way, my grief transformed into love. Only love. The most intense, magnificent, powerful version of love I've ever felt before.
Yep.
Imagine how you would feel if your child walked through the door right now, alive and well. When I paint that picture in my head and feel it, the overwhelming emotion that comes flooding out feels the same as the intense way I grieved, sobbing. This time in relief and joy, in shock, disbelief, confusion, and total loss of control. Grief is love.
It is.
Thank you so much, Emily, for all that you do, both through your important work as a grief and life coach and also through your very wise book to help people rebuild their lives after the loss of their child. And I thank you from my heart for this inspiring, enlightening, and very touching interview today. And here's a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. As I like to say, to be continued. Thank you again, Emily.
Thank you.
Many blessings, and bye for now. Thank you.